Women are most beautiful when they're pregnant. Background: I was 26 years old at the time, pregnant, and lived in a very rural area. Tom had always been friends with my friends throughout high school. He was the quiet art kid who had insane natural talent, seemed nice enough, but despite always wearing a smile, he just gave people, girls mostly, the feeling that something was off with him. I never spent a lot of one-on-one time with him because of this, but I never really had any reason to believe he was dangerous, just weird. Anyways, years after high school, I reconnect with my high school sweetheart Jamie, who happens to be best friends with Tom. Everything was going great for Jamie and me. We got married, started a family, we're remodeling an old family home on acres of land. That was our own, the dream. By then, Tom had become a regular at gatherings. I noticed more and more that he had weapons fascination, and also liked to brag on himself, obnoxious, but still nothing made me feel threatened. Tom, by this time, had married a woman who was old enough to be his mother. They were not a healthy, cohesive couple. Super codependent, manipulative, and apparently they had gotten physical with one another. In the midst of this, Tom had started drinking and lying about his drinking, getting to DIYs, and even showing up at our house drunk. Jamie eventually told him to show up sober, don't come over at all. I was about 3 months pregnant, and he didn't want that in our home. Time goes by, no word from Tom. That is until about 3 months since his last visit. He calls my husband, wanting to chat, and sounds very, very depressed. I'm about 6 months along at this time. Jamie has him come by and they chat outside. Tom wants to leave his wife. Good for him. But something isn't right, even more so than normal. Jamie sneaks to Tom's scooter while Tom comes inside to use our restroom. He finds Tom's stashed bottles of vodka. While Jamie is still outside, Tom, all of a sudden, doesn't have to use the restroom anymore. He turns to me and looks me up and down, so cold and expressionless. You know, Jess, women are most beautiful when they're pregnant. You've never been more gorgeous. He makes a move to get closer to me, but by this time, Jamie is walking in. Come outside, we need to talk. Shortly afterwards, I hear Tom leave and Jamie come to tell me about the alcohol. I tell him about the creepy comment and we both agree that he can't be trusted. He was not welcome here until he got help. Tom stopped calling, no text, nothing. Jamie reached out to make sure he was okay with no response. From what we heard from his family, he was okay, just working and staying busy trying to keep sober. We really hoped he was taking care of himself. 2 months later, at 8 months pregnant, I'm no longer working preterm labor, and Jamie works 6 days a week. That's a lot of time alone. His schedule was always the same and had not changed in years. So when Tom randomly shows up at our door at 10 a.m. on a day he knew Jamie worked, I was confused. I usually napped around that time because I was huge and tired. Luckily, I was awake this time and in our front room. This room has a huge window that faces our driveway, and the door to my right leads to our garage. I shot him a nervous wave through my window. He didn't seem to see me and was grabbing something out of the duffel bag on his scooter. He pulled out a shotgun. I know there's fight or flight, but I just froze. He also grabbed a bottle and took a swig from it. Then he finally notices me. Sheer horror on my face. In return, I get a hateful look. He says something I can't hear, then smiles. Not a happy smile. Packs up his gun and leaves. I immediately call Jamie. He didn't answer. I text totally freaked out while checking locks. Jamie calls back about 19 minutes later, and as we're talking, Jamie's dad calls. Tom tries to break into his home. Thankfully, Jamie's dad is always armed. He caught him red-handed but didn't call the cops because of their long-standing friendship with Tom's family. Apparently, Tom hadn't had his gun out when he was caught, so Jamie's dad didn't feel threatened enough to call the cops. Not happy about that. Wasn't my choice. Don't worry. I'll call the cops myself later that day. That alone was scary and super confusing. But what Jamie told me later really freaked me out. When I was working, I worked a set schedule except for occasionally I'll be called in. One day, a month prior to my incident, Jamie called in sick and I, coincidentally, was called into work. I hated leaving him sick, but duty called. Jamie said he had been napping a little after 9 due to a high fever. He had awoken at some point in the sound of doors opening and closing, but was so out of it he figured it must have been his fever. What woke him up and kept him at least semi-alert was the bell on our bedroom door. He heard it jingle twice slightly. He vaguely remarks looking up and seeing what looked like Tom at the end of our bed, staring at him. He said he passed out from the fever, getting worse, and came to not very long afterwards. By then, Tom was gone, so Jamie figured it was just a fever dream messing with him. After the gun incident, though, he wasn't so sure anymore. It's been over 2 years, and we've made no attempts to talk to Tom. He used to drive by from time to time, but never tried to make contact. This has stopped, but I still make sure all of my locks and windows are secure throughout the day. Tom, let's not meet ever again. I'm pregnant, you creep. Yes, another New Year's story. I, my family, and I decided to spend New Year's with summer friends of the family to ring in 2015. There are 3 big families and we're all pretty close. There were about 20 of us there. The family hosting us that night made this huge wonderful meal, and we were all so excited. The hostess, to avoid confusion, we'll call Maria. We were lounging around the house waiting for Maria's husband, son, and son-in-law to come home from work, having a good time. Maria's son-in-law came home, and it turned out that he had invited his friend from work to join in the festivities. Everyone was welcoming and tried to make him comfortable. I began to notice that I kept catching friend's eye ever since he showed up. I was already noticeably pregnant, and Pedro, one of the dads there, took notice and began to bring up my pregnancy, obviously with the intention of letting friend know that in my condition, I was certainly not looking for a hookup. This plan backfired. Friend began to give me pregnancy advice and talking about his children, and his eyes began to shine the way a person does so when they're becoming aroused. This made me feel very, very uncomfortable, and I decided that I would just avoid friend for the night. It didn't matter where I was. He would always do his damn best to keep me in line of vision and would not take his eyes off of me of any length of time, even though he was in deep conversation with Pedro, who, God bless him, did his best to try to distract friend from me and make sure he was not near me. Eventually, at about 11, we all decided that we wanted coffee, and when Maria mentioned she had cake mix, I volunteered to make the cake so that we could have something sweet to eat with our coffee. At this point, friend is fidgeting like mad. He looked like he was on drugs. He suddenly gets up and, as I was about to crack the eggs, and got so close to me that he had me pinned against himself and a section of the counter. He is so close to me and starts giving me advice on how to make the cake. This is cake from a fucking box. I've done this a million times. I start to tell him this, and he keeps talking over me, and he presses his crotch on me so that I can feel that he is a rock hard and gives me that look. I'm so nauseous, uneasy, and annoyed at this point that I say, look, I've done this a million times and don't need your help. Thankfully, you can perfectly see into the kitchen from the family den, so he finally gave up and went back to the den. Many more things happened throughout the night, which made me want to throw up, like the New Year's hug when he tried to feel me up. I have nothing against people with pregnancy fetishes. I can understand that people have sexual preference. But this guy clearly didn't get the hint that I was not interested, and didn't care that I'm carrying someone else's child in my womb. I found it to be a sickening thing that he would do this to a pregnant woman. I hope I never meet him again. Pregnant and got creeped out. So last year, I was pregnant with baby number 2 and kid number 1 was in nursery. I'm mentioning this as she only went for a couple hours a few days a week, and as I lived pretty far away most days, I would just stay in the town center and do a little shopping. Anyways, this day, I went for a bite to eat, and when I was exiting, I heard someone say, "Excuse me, do you know where the Subway restaurant is?" So I said it's just up the road, and right so. Anyways, it was the same direction as I was going, but when I came to turn off, he carried on walking and caught up to me and said, "I think you're pretty. Are you single?" I said, "No, I'm engaged." Then he noticed my bump and said, "Oh, are you pregnant? Is that why your boobs are so big?" And continued asking me some disturbing stuff about certain other parts. I was so terrified, I dived into the nearest shop and rang my partner. After 20 minutes, I felt safe to leave. I went to my kid's nursery early to pick her up and explain to staff what happened. I was crying and shaking so much, I had to go in the staff room, where they made me a cup of tea and gave me some gingerbreads, and the manager drove us home. The thing that scared me is we were in a totally public area, so I wasn't scared of a sexual attack. But if he turned violent, I wasn't sure how I could protect my baby bump, you know? The worst thing is, it happened in the middle of the day, and the police went through CCTV footage and couldn't find him. I've seen him a few more times around when I've been with my 6'5" boyfriend, and after my partner spoke to him, he hasn't done anything else. The very last time I saw him, though, I was going by on a bus, and he was talking with a police officer, so hopefully he was jailed. Creepy man that sexually harassed me while I was pregnant. Let's not meet again. He wanted to play stepdad to my baby. Years ago, I was working at a craft store, and I recently discovered I was pregnant. The father and I were best friends with the occasional benefits. I had been told months prior to this I could not have children, so I wasn't exactly careful. At this point, we were just trying to figure out our plan for parenting and work out our real feelings for each other. One night, I was cleaning up an aisle, finishing up my clothes and duties, when a man walked up to me. He was a black male, short but hefty, with beads braided into his hair. I smiled at him as he approached me and asked if he needed any help. "Yeah, I'm sorry. You're a gorgeous girl." I smiled politely, thanked him, and asked again what he was looking for. "I don't even remember now. You think I can get your number?" "I'm flattered, but not available and also pregnant." "Is the dad in the picture?" Feeling rejected from a conversation with a dad, I had a foot in my mouth moment. "Not really." "Girl, you shouldn't be doing this alone. I'll be the stepdad. Hell, I'll be the dad. Please, let me get your number." Wanting him to go away, I gave him a fake number. I wrongly assumed he would run when he found out I was with child. I also wrongly assumed he would get the hint when he tried to call and it wasn't me. He knew my first name because of the name tag. I never did find out his. Everyone called him the movie man because he was always selling bootleg movies outside of a gas station. I put him out of my mind the following week, until I came back in after a day off. He had been back in, asking for me. I told my manager about the encounter. We decided that, since I worked in a department in the back of the store, when they saw him come in, they would page a code name to go into the stockroom. The next couple of weeks, Abby was called to the stockroom at least 8 times. A week went by without incident. We all figured he had given up and let our guard down. One day I was walking up to the registers when he walked in the door. It was close to Christmas, and we were extremely busy. I changed directions quickly, pretended I didn't see him, and headed straight for one of the few male co-workers. Movie man caught up with me and grabbed my arm as I reached the male co-worker. "I've been trying to call you and gave me a fake number." His grip getting tighter on my arm. I looked at my male co-worker, and he was obliviously opening boxes to stock merchandise. "No, I didn't. The number you gave me is disconnected. Look, I'm now with the baby's daddy. I'm not interested." "What? I'm not available." "Maybe not now, but I'll wait." He angrily let go of my arm and walked out the store. That was him. I walked over here for help. "Thanks for that," I said sarcastically to my coworker. Because I'm mixed and movie man is black, coworker assumed we knew each other and wasn't paying attention. The manager on duty had to call the police. Getting yelled at by an officer for even giving him a fake number is fun when you're a hormonal pregnant mess. Getting yelled at by the manager for being stupid is fun. She got a stern lecture from both officer and the head manager for not reporting it when he was coming back in multiple times. It's been 8 years, and other than a few Abby to stockroom pages after the last encounter, I have not seen or heard from him since. I'm also a lot less polite when it comes to situations like this. Super dad. So I, like amongst many others, are blessed with just an amazing dad. Not. I'm gonna start at the beginning to get to the context. When my mom and dad got together, my mom got pregnant with me almost immediately. And she didn't really know how big those consequences would be. In the beginning, it was all great as usual. But shortly, he started to show who he really was. Suddenly, he thought that he wasn't the father and decided that the best solution would be to kick me out. Literally, I don't really know how long this period was, but I think it was less than a year. During this year, he did such things as try to wake my mom up with a punch in her face, but first missed and hit my brother, 4 years old, instead. And when they stood over the sink spitting blood, he says, "Don't feel sorry for yourself." Climbs up to my mom's apartment, 4th floor, through the balcony, and sits in the living room when she comes home from a friend. Her friend calls her soon after she came home, but my dad answers and tells her that my mom can't speak at the moment because she's too drunk. Her friend understood immediately that something was wrong because they had just met, and the reason that she was fucking pregnant and didn't drink, so she ran over to my mom just to stop him beating my mom to death. He took out his knife collection, stuck each knife just slightly in my mom's back so she could tell which knife he was going to kill her with. When I was a newborn, my brother got injured in a serious traffic accident, so he had to live in the hospital for a while. My mom had 2 cats, and she knew she couldn't take care of them, so she gave my dad money to get them to a vet who could put them down. Stupid mom. He bought drugs for the money and killed the cats in my brother's room. When we all came home, my mom had to clean the walls from all the blood. Exactly how he killed them, I don't know, and I don't want to know either. And so on and so on and so on and so on. I could keep going on all day. My mom was obviously frightened of him and couldn't live in the same town as him. So soon after I was born, we moved. Even though all this had happened, she still let me to come see him during holidays and such. I did always cry the first night, but back then, I really didn't know why. He didn't lay a hand on me though. He did threaten me a couple times, and once he ran in the bedroom with a huge knife screaming that he was going to cut my guts when I had a stomach ache. When I was around 8 years old, decided my mom and I couldn't visit him anymore. I'm not sure what he did that would make that decision, but I guess it was really, really bad. I've heard several lies about what led her to that. When I was 14, I started to have brief contact with him a couple times, and I always regretted that because he really is a true psycho. When I was 18, I'm 28 years old now. I moved back to town and tried with the contact a couple more times, always ending with the same regret. Anyways, for about a year, I got the apartment of my dreams, but I knew that it wasn't that far from where my dad lived. I thought that, though, it was far enough for me to be safe. Oh, such a fool I am. 2 weeks after I moved in, he started to send me texts in the middle of the night and said that he had been outside my apartment. Shocked, I replied and asked him how the fuck he knew where I lived. He wrote back my address, which floor and which fucking apartment number I had, and started to threaten me and my boyfriend and said he was coming to me. I called the police, who thought I should go back to bed instead. Me, afraid for my life, thinking of a Spider-Man superpowers of like climbing 4 buildings, buckled up with knives next to my bed, the couch, and the bathroom everywhere, just to be sure I was ready when he came to get me. I called my mom and she tried to calm me down, but it did only get worse. She couldn't hide her fear and nothing freaks me out more than that. After that, I didn't sleep for several days and just sat and looked at the balcony, and every time I heard a noise, I started to cry. After about a week of my own hell, I talked to my aunt, who told me my dad had moved. Not from me though, to me. I'm not fucking kidding you. He moved exactly 212 meters from me. He still lives there. I'm too afraid to go out and live like a prisoner in my own home. I tried to go out sometimes, and of course, I always see him, which just leads to more fear. I don't know when he will snap again, and how bad it's gonna be, but I'm not ready to die yet. I thought you guys would like to hear about my super dad with super Spider-Man powers, and I prefer not to talk about it that much with my friends anyways. And I don't want to exactly scare the ever-living shit out of my boyfriend too much. So that's why I don't really tell him. And finally, I'm sorry for all the grammatical errors that exist here. English is not my first language and blah blah blah.